Hello, it's Jack Tiohtià here of Attention Magazine. Welcome to Crucial Listening, the podcast where I speak with musicians and sound artists about 3 albums that are important to them. My guest this time is Jeremy Young, a creator of concrète electronic tape music from Montreal. Jeremy works in lots of different contexts. You've got the trio Sontag Shogun, the poetry sound duo Cloud Circuit, and also associated Signtone Services, which is like a library music emulation project which came out of a dream he had. It's very cool. He's also got 2 new solo records, one of which is called Cable Car, released on Hello Clean Trance. The other is Masses, released on We Here and Now. 2 wonderful Ontario-based labels. And I actually mastered Masses and had a great time doing it. And what I didn't realize prior to this discussion with Jeremy is that both Cable Car and Masses have a very intimate relationship. Cable Car, by the sounds of it, was made through a process of real painstaking, cerebral scrutiny, lots of editing, lots of manipulation of the source materials, and Masses was like the cathartic aftermath of that, the manifestation of the desire to just let loose with his sources after working on Cable Car so much. And Jeremy's sources are very cool. A lot of them are machines dating way back as early as like the 1940s. And they're single frequency oscillators, many of which have a primary function of calibrating circuit boards on fridges and stuff like that. So they're not primarily intended for music. Jeremy wrangles them into these beautiful shapes, but what I love most of all is the sense that they are quietly resisting this adherence to structure. There's so much noise spilling out of the gaps. So many tiny little beautiful tuning discrepancies, these little strains and cracks of imperfection, which just create this wobble of tension within Jeremy's music. And also so many lovely resonances as well, as you've got these little discrepancies in tuning. So the whole thing feels like it's trying to just subtly drag itself back into a state of non-musical disarray. And Jeremy is just quietly wielding and goading them into these shapes. It's really beautiful and quite mesmerizing to listen to this process unfold. And Jeremy was lovely to speak to, having mastered the record. This was our first verbal conversation, so it is so lovely to just spend some time chatting about music, and I loved the records that Jeremy picked as well. So if you're enjoying the podcast, you can support it over at ko-fi.com/crucial listening. There is a link in the show notes. Thank you so much to everyone who's donated. And if you're just enjoying the show, that's also awesome. Thank you very, very much. Okay, here we go. This is Jeremy Young on Crucial Listening. Hello, Jeremy. Welcome to Crucial Listening.
Hey, Jack. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. So you're here today to talk about 3 important albums. Before we get to those, I want to talk about your music, and I want to start with Masses, which is a new record that's coming out and will be out by the time this releases on We Here and Now. Mm-hmm. So you...
Yes, mastered by you, I have to say. Thanks so much.
Which
so this full
welcome.
Disclosure for the listener.
Yes, the
a little
conflict
inside
of interest.
Baseball. Yeah.
But you sent me during that process a picture of the machines that we are using for this record, which I also think I saw on your webcam just now too. Tell me about these machines, because I mean, also you mentioned that it's taken about 10 years to wield them, I think you said, in a musically organized way. What are these machines, and what has the journey been like with these machines?
Yeah, well, that's it's the journey of my life as a musician. But I did start out kind of playing more, I want to say, traditionally organized music. I wouldn't say anything I've ever done is traditional or good, for that matter. But at least in the beginning of my musical career, I was sort of shooting for something based on forms and means of organizing musical ideas that I had heard in other places. And I think where the journey comes from is understanding how to use these machines. I'll get into the machines in a moment. How to use these sort of sonic machines to create a form of music that I'm kind of creating as I go. It's incredibly personal. The basic things that I'm using are sine and square wave oscillators. They're monophonic, single frequency oscillators. They just create like a sinusoidal wave or a square wave or a triangle wave in some cases, but one note or one frequency at a time. And they're rarely ever tuned exactly to a note, right? So this isn't a guitar with a fretboard or a clarinet with sound holes where the tuning is, you might be a little flat or sharp based on the air pressure or something, but essentially it's established. This is just a single frequency and it's a pure tone. Like there's no chorus effect or delay or like these big harmonic, there's almost barely even harmonic resonance, except in the case of blasting these tones through a speaker into a room, in which case like the room creates the harmonic effect. So what I'm trying to say is these are not necessarily musical machines. If anything, I mean, these are like pieces of test equipment created in some cases as far back as the 40s in my case, but I think a lot of my machines are like probably from the 60s or early 70s, and used to calibrate circuit boards like on a refrigerator or or like computers or radios or whatever. And so to put the tone into a musical context requires like a couple things, in my case at least. First, I have to temper the harshness of the sound. A sine wave is a very pretty sound. It's just a pure tone. It's almost like an Aeolian flute or something. It's very natural sounding. But like if you're just listening to a single frequency in a sine wave, it's incredibly harsh and it's very unenjoyable. So a little bit of like reverb or a little bit of delay goes a long way in terms of just landing that sound onto the ear. And then the other thing is, okay, how to play the damn thing. Like, in one kind of reality, this is not too dissimilar from like a violin, where there's no fretboard stops or something at the notes. So you sort of have to feel your way, or, with hand-eye coordination or hand-ear coordination, you have to sort of feel your way between the notes. You have to train your ear incredibly well. And to understand the distance between like a B flat and a B natural in the 6th or 7th octave or register, versus the 1st or 2nd register, which is really far down. Like the difference of space between those notes is enormous. Yeah. Like the difference between a B flat and a B natural, like when it's up in a higher register, is like maybe a millimeter in terms of moving the frequency dial versus a few inches down in the lower registers. So these are things that kind of matter when it comes to me turning these into an instrument and playing them. And in a live context, when you're on stage and you're in front of people and like you can't fuck it up, like like it's not like in the recording studio where you can go back and redo it. Like it's kind of important that I actually so anyway, all that's to say, I make use of those oscillators, magnetic tape, tape loops, 1/4-inch tape, which is sort of lo-fi in and of itself. And I tend to I tend to use lo-fi tape machines versus high fidelity tape machines, and tape machines with like whirly gigs and and like complicated options.
Right.
My machines are quite simple, and that's sort of the point. Yeah, and radio waves.
So this might seem intuitive to you. I find this fascinating because I feel like I'm maybe nearer the other end of the spectrum in terms of my relationship to making sound, in the sense that all sounds quite stressful to me. I've seen videos of you playing live, and you're working with things that look like they could very easily perish or rip, or there's a sense that there's something appealing about wringing these sounds out from very difficult circumstances. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, well, I mean, like in terms of the journey, I think my early journey was, okay, I really like these sounds, but then how do I apply them into a musical context? Because I don't want to just be noise, like unlistenable. It's not that I don't like noise music. I really do, and there's a catharsis there that I really gravitate towards. But I'm a little bit of like a softer pony. Like, I think I like my band Sontag Shogun is piano, vocals, and then whatever the heck I bring into the table, which is these, oscillators and tape and stuff. But it's very listenable. It's very pretty music, and it's listenable, although we try to do things in very difficult ways, and it's all analog, and everything feels like it's about to break. And on the one hand, it's a little bit of a personal challenge. How do I make these things musical? And how do I put them into a musical context that's sort of like in between electronic music or electroacoustic music, or, even jazz, or in some cases like pop or drone or something, like just sort of fitting in between the lines. On the other hand, that's kind of the point, like the fact that they're so close to breaking. I think I'm not against like digital music, but I think there needs to be a flag planted somewhere that just kind of reminds people that, perfection isn't natural, and it's not human. And like, great, make the most beautiful sounding, perfect record with like these pristine digital sounds, and there's no rough edges. That's awesome. Great. Like, people love that. I listen to that sometimes too. There's a place for that when we seek out entertainment. We maybe want to be comforted. But also, let's just remind ourselves that to be human is to die slowly.
Yes.
And in some cases quickly, which is unfortunate. But like, our bodies are like constantly breaking down. There's very little perfection in the human body, and how we go through life, like things break, things need to be repaired, things are, this is just how things are. And so I think to put that into an art, a sonic, artful context, I hesitate to use the word sound art, even though what I'm trying to say is art as sound, art as music, like a sonic way of engaging with the creative act. That's sort of where I plant my flag. I'm not like an analog purist, and everything sounds better on tape, and the digital age of recording is vastly inferior to. That's not me. It's rather just to kind of put at the forefront of a sonic experience this idea, at any point, the mere tone you're listening to can start to break down, let alone the entire rest of the sonic scape. The mindset comes from this idea of wabi-sabi, which is a Japanese philosophical concept about the idea that at every stage of an object or being's life, there is both like growth and decay embedded in the current moment. And just to recognize that everything is in a period of decay, and change is sort of inevitable, right? So I think that's a really pertinent question. It gets to the heart of sort of not just my personal challenge as an artist, trying to wield these machines in a musical way and make them pretty, but what I think just sort of needs to be acknowledged and stated when we regard art and the creative act.
Gorgeous, Jeremy. That's great. So, like I say, one of the manifestations of this process is Masses, the record that I mastered, which, thanks to everything that you've just said around imperfection, is so rich. And I think some things that perhaps if they were tuned precisely through digital means would be quite flat and pristine, because of the way that you navigate having to tune these things manually and kind of by nature precariously. They just never leave my head. They're so compelling. But you have another record as well that, as we're talking, is coming out in the forthcoming week, called Cable Car, which you just described to me as having an angel and devil on your shoulder. And these two records, I mean, I'd be intrigued first to know which is which, but could you also talk to me about the relationship between Masses and Cable Car too?
Yes. Well, I mean, very literally, like, Cable Car and Masses were recorded during the same time period. My goal at that time, which was sort of, God, when was that? I guess autumn 2023 into late winter 2024. So, well, I guess I finished it about a year ago. But Cable Car came first. I really wanted to make a record like that. And Masses came out of my frustrations with making a record like that. And that's the angel and the devil thing. So, all right, I have a fraught relationship with the quote unquote studio. Just sort of recording in general. I really don't love it. I'm more of like I'm a live musician. I love being on stage. I love engaging with a physical space, and with people and with bodies in that space. But it's also like, I just don't like editing. There's something, I don't mind the studio in and of itself. I actually come into my home studio a lot just to kind of sit and sort of rehearse, or like turn the oscillators on and splice some tape for a couple hours. Like, this is fun for me. It's sort of like a blue collar kind of way of working at music. But then the whole recording process, it's difficult for me, and I always feel like in editing things, I'm making these decisions that I'm not even totally sure I want to be making, like to cut something or to redo something, or is this really like a wrong note? Or, like I kind of have to constantly second guess myself. But Cable Car is a very edited record. Like, it's a bunch of pieces. I think it's like 10 pieces. They tend to be on the shorter side of things. And it was made using the found tape source material. So, like, I bought a whole bunch of people's reel-to-reel tapes on eBay. I really slowly went through all of them and found samples and things that I kind of wanted to extrapolate, and then build pieces in response to that. I had sort of always wanted to do a record like that, and I did it. And it took forever, and I hated it. I like the music, but it was like pulling teeth. And on top of that, my grandmother died while I was making that, and so actually the single is called Judy, and that's named after her. I made that like the week after she died. And so there's a lot of things I love about this record, but making it was really hard. And so throughout the process, I was like, God, after this is done, I really just want to do something that's more raw, more live, more linear, kind of pared down a little bit, and just that kind of hot tube sound that I feel like I'm sort of missing from this like edited down version of my work. And so that's where Masses came from. It was like, turn on the oscillators and let them rip. And it tends to be a little closer to what I sound like in a live context, although of course there's editing with that album as well. But also in a funny way, Masses is a little bit of a love letter to this piece of machinery. I'll send you a photo of it, which is one of the oscillators, which my friend Nicolas Bernier lent me when one of my touring oscillators went dead last year before I was going to go to Europe. He lent me one of his small oscillators, which is like, it can fit in a suitcase and it's pretty robust, so it's good for touring. and it was the Hewlett-Packard 209A. So I named a track on Masses after the 209A, but really the entire record was made with the 209A before I gave it back to Nicola. Like I sort of came back from tour, and then I like neglected to go back to his house and give the machine back because I was so in love with it. I was like, I'm just gonna do this. But it's like, to me, it's like the Stradivarius of oscillators.
Oh wow.
It's just got such a tone and such a feel, and I just loved it. My hands like are just on that machine, just like I'm one with it. And so as soon as I gave him back the 209A that I borrowed from him, I went on the internet and I bought myself like 2 more.
Wow.
The Masses to me is a little bit of a love letter to that one piece of machinery that actually appears not at all on Cable Car. And it's pretty much all over Masses. Anyway.
Oh gosh. Okay. Well, as may be evident, I've spent a lot of time with Masses, and it's wonderful. Yeah. I've spent no time with Cable Car, so I'm really excited to have the full picture and hear Masses as this kind of cathartic release after the what you went through to make Cable Car. That's exciting. I'm
curious to know if you do kind of do a full listen through to Cable Car, just like your impressions of that.
Oh, I'll let you know.
Yeah,
absolutely. So I'll put links in the show notes to both of those. Like I say, they'll be out, both of them, by the time this airs.
Around the same, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, wicked. Okay, Jeremy, so let's go to your 3 important records. Ooh. So, one question I like to ask at this point is how you thought about the word important when picking your list. So was there a way you understood important when coming up with a list of records that you did?
Yeah, that's a good question. Like, I responded to this prompt, I think, in a very personal way. I mean, on the one hand, these 3 records are very important to me personally, but they're not like my favorite records. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to do my favorite records because I think that just says more about me as a person and less about me as an artist, like where I grew up, what, my social life when I was growing up, or in these kind of pivotal moments in my life. And of course they're really important, the albums that I would have chosen in that context are super important to me as a musician, but like they don't really say something about why my ear gravitates towards certain artists or forms of creativity. And so what I wanted was to try to get at 3 important records to me that I think are crucial for anyone to listen to, number one. Like, they're just great records. But also, they give me a window into a form of creating that I can easily tap into, even though I don't make music in the style of any of these 3 records. Like, it's just like, what's the ethos? Why does this make me cry? And why do I strive to achieve something even close to what this is as an artist, even if I'm not going for the same sound? To me, that's why these are very important for me.
Wow. Okay, cool. Let's go for your first important record then, Jeremy. Which one do you want to go for first?
We'll go with Magnolia Electric Co.
Cool. All right, Magnolia Electric Co. Josephine, released in 2009, right? So yeah, maybe start with a little introduction as to why this one's important to you.
So Magnolia Electric Co's Josephine. This is the last record from that band. It was one of the last records that Jason Molina put out before he died in 2013. It wasn't his last ever output. So I didn't mean to bring this up as sort of a swan song, but in a weird way, I mean, it kind of was the swan song of this band. Mm. And this was recorded with Steve Albini at Electrical Audio in Chicago in 2008. Magnolia Electrica was touring a lot at that time, and they were writing a lot, which was unique because when I was in college, I want to say this was sort of like 2005, 2006 maybe, Magnolia Electrica came to Montreal, where I was living, and my friend and I somehow had booked an interview with Jason Molina after sound check. So we sat down with him and recorded this interview with him, just like these college kids. And actually, I wanted to publish it in the school newspaper, and for some reason it didn't work out. But the conversation really centered around Molina's songwriting process and how at the time he was in this phase of like feast and famine songwriting, where he would just like not touch a pen at all until like the week before going into the studio, or even just being in the studio or something. And then it would like all of what he had sort of soaked up in the last year or whatever would kind of come flowing. And the interesting thing about Josephine was that it was the opposite during this time period. Jason was like writing all the time. But in this interesting way, that record was made like really impromptu in the studio as well. Like Jason would sort of wake up and write like 4 hours a day or something, and then go back and revisit stuff that he had written, and then bring it into the band and be like, okay, I'm hearing like sort of like this, and then, you know, you can come in with this or whatever. And the band would put together the songs on the spot, and then they recorded all in the same room in one take to tape
what the hell?
With Albini. And then they did like max 2 run-throughs of any given song that's on that record. Like max 2. Like some of what you're hearing is like the first take of a song, everybody playing in the same room, just mic'd up and straight to tape. If you listen to that record, you're like, oh yeah, this is good. It's sort of like good songwriting, kind of good musicianship, like well arranged stuff. They wrote it. Some of these pieces they wrote a day or two before, and like literally this is like the first or second take, and it's just like printed, which is unreal. But I think, first of all, Songs Ohio, very important band for me growing up. Like I just fell in love with Jason Molina's songwriting, his sort of dark authenticity, like the kind of loneliness of it all. I was listening, you know, when I found out about Songs Ohio when I was younger, I was kind of just totally immersed in this noise, but palatable, bandy songwriting kind of way of making music that, I want to say like Grouper was in there, Bardo Pond, Hershta, Jackie O Motherfucker, Silver Mount Zion. Like, you know, these were important bands to me. So Songs Ohio fit right into that. Like, you know, Americana country, but sort of lonely, psychedelic, empty. So Magnolia Electrico comes along, and it's a little bit of a different style. It's more continuous in terms of its band members than Songs Ohio, which always felt like just an extension of Molina. More of a band. But at the same time, like, you know, that first album, when Songs Ohio sort of created the Magnolia Electrico album, with Farewell Transmission and all those great songs, that's the best album that they ever did as a band. No one would disagree with that. It's just such an incredible album. But Josephine is like, by the time that comes around, it's like, this is a band that has been on the road so much together and is so just confident and comfortable with each other that instead of like making the big epic climactic record that like I think people were sort of like expecting out of this band in their like 4th album, like they just sort of like went really simple, just these like simple songs. They feel like works in progress because they literally are, and I just love that. And so I think like number one, I just love that the album was recorded to tape. I love that it's like Molina kind of has this thing where when a song feels done, it's done. And it like, because you could edit lyrics forever, and they're like never going to be perfect, or like you could try to tell the best version of this story you're trying to tell, or you could just kind of like roll the tape and like let it swing. It's sort of like the Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds kind of way of working, which I also gravitate towards. And it's like, no, it's not perfect. And no, I probably should have like gone up a whole step or something on that last vocal take or whatever. Who cares?
Yeah, right.
Who cares? Like that doesn't matter. What matters is you're in the room, you're playing music together, you're feeling it, and like there it is. Right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, what I find interesting about that is it's one thing to believe that as like an abstract philosophy, and then it's another thing to have the faith and the conviction to just do it as well, because I love the sound of that, and I'm like, when I hear you talk about that, I'm like, absolutely. But if I'm making music and then I hear my voice do like a during a take, I'm like, that's going. I'm not standing by that. So I too also admire people who have that kind of conviction to say, I'm okay with those imperfections, and I'm very happy for them to stay within the final record.
I mean, there's not like glaring imperfections in this record. It's not like somebody hits a wrong note, and it's like, I think, but I mean, that's sort of like, that's another thing. It's like they're that good where like they just dial it in when it counts, and like, I don't know. It's a really, there's something about like I said this before, but that first Magnolia Electric Co record, which is from the band is Songs of Ohio.
Is like, that the one with the owl thing on the front? Yeah.
Wait, an owl?
Is it an owl? I've always seen.
What is that? A raven or something? Actually, I can't remember. It's the William Schaff artwork. Like that's like the better record in terms of like just influence, the bigness of it, the songwriting. I mean, a lot of like shared singing across like 3 or 4 different band members. But like, I mean, this one is just so Albini. It's like, stay the fuck away from the creative process. Just let it flow, record to tape, and don't second guess yourself. And God damn it if that isn't like such a good reminder as musicians when we're going to record. Like, you know what I mean?
100%.
Yeah, I think just hearkening back to this idea of the wabi-sabi that I was talking about before, like, yeah, like no glaring imperfections per se on this record, but like the songwriting is really kind of cut short en route to perfection, and I think that's quite clear. It sounds like Molina is just sort of like jotting down some lyrics, then crossing a couple words off, you know, in the moment, making a decision. Okay, this line is coming up. Actually, I don't really like the and, so I'm just not going to sing it, even though the and kind of might tie the line together. Like that kind of like quick thinking, on the fly thing is it's just something I keep in mind a lot. I don't write lyrics. I'm like not a lyrical songwriter in that way, but it's just sort of like, keeping that in mind, like, okay, I could go over this like melody or add another couple of overdubs to this like heavy piece or something, or I just sort of keep it the way that it is in this kind of simple, half broken, half decaying kind of state, and just like let it live crystallized in that forever. I think it's beautiful.
Do you have a favorite track?
There's probably like 4 tracks that I think are just like the ones on the record that, like, if I'm putting on the record and I have to stop for whatever reason, like I have to, you know, like I will have to listen to those tracks before I stop listening to the album. It's like, well, Josephine is great. Shenandoah, I think, is the prettiest song on the record. Whippoorwill, probably best lyrics. And then the Handing Down is the big sort of epic song. Which feels like, you know, early Magnolia Electric Co. energy live.
Held above my faded dreams, heart worn more than some, I guess, but I'm still holding at the seams, still holding at the seams.
Jeremy, let's go to your second important record. Which one do you want to talk about now? Two very different directions.
Okay, well, while I still have energy, we'll do the Baby Huey one.
Okay, great. So Baby Huey, the Baby Huey story, the living legend, 1971. Wow. So again, give me a little introduction as to why this one's important to you.
Let me introduce let me introduce Baby Huey. James Thomas Ramey, born in 1944, gave himself the name Baby Huey as like a little bit of a poking fun at his own weight issues. So already right off the bat, I'm sold. I love just not taking yourself so seriously and elevating your flaws and kind of like owning them. He was like between 350 and 400 pounds at parts of his life. He died at age 26 of a drug overdose. So he was in and out of rehab. I think he had gone to rehab once or twice. So, I mean, this is like a little bit of a tortured soul, but, you know, big human, big personality, big everything, big voice. And I think this is the only album that ever came out. Well, okay. Baby Huey and the Babysitters were a band in Chicago. I think they did a couple 45s on a local label, and so they did a little bit of touring around the Midwest. Never really took off, but they had planned to record with Curtis Mayfield. Curtis was like a huge fan of this band and wanted to put them on record, but the sort of story there is that Curtis didn't like the Babysitters. He didn't like the band. He loved Baby Huey, loved the energy, but wanted to put together a new band and wanted to like write some songs for Baby Huey to sing. And so, number one, it was awkward.
Right.
They never really got to do this recording. I don't know exactly how that went down, but I think it was just a series of sort of like lost threads and false starts or whatever. So that session never happened. On the other hand, Baby Huey's like freaking in and out of rehab, and the band can't even really go on the road or anything, waiting to record so that they can, you know, actually do like a full country tour or something. But, you know, he's dealing with drug addiction and this kind of stuff. And so when Baby Huey died in 1970, Curtis Mayfield was like, screw it. I owe it to this guy to put something out. And so this is like a bunch of live recordings that are mixed to sound like they're in the studio or something. And Curtis Mayfield produced this album posthumously on Ramey's behalf, which I think is like beautiful and awesome. And it's a little bit of like maybe he's kind of making amends for not giving the band the chance. You know what I mean?
Right.
To record. So that, I mean, it's a little bit of a beautiful story, but God, the other thing with this, this is like a perfect album to me. I mean, it's like huge. It's like big sound, big band, big voice, big everything. Like, I mean, Ramey is like redlining with the vocals like throughout. You know what I mean? But I think there's just so many through lines. So I discovered this album because I don't remember when that was, but there was this great compilation, which might have just been like a digital compilation or something, but of like original songs that the Wu-Tang Clan had sampled. And it was like Lynn Collins, Ann Peebles, Syl Johnson, Joe Tex, Donny Hathaway, you know. And this, and like, first of all, I love the Wu-Tang Clan, always have, love their sampling. But like this album really brought like, just like funk and rare soul of the 70s and late 60s, just like, it brought it all together in this way that I was like, holy shit, like there's so much here to explore. And I heard the track, I listened to the track that was sampled in whatever song it was sampled in. I think it was Hard Times, which has actually been sampled a lot in hip-hop. But then I was like, oh, I wonder what the rest of this record sounds like. And like from minute one of putting on this album, it's like 0 to 60 in like 4 seconds. Like you're just in a Maserati speeding towards a wall. It's crazy. And I just like, I think I was just like hooked from the start. And yeah, I mean, have you listened to this?
Only because you picked it. Yeah, this is really something, this record. And I think when
sounds like nothing.
Yeah, right. When you put it in that context as well, it's just like this real sudden flash, and then it's like it goes out, right? This is like the one emission from Baby
Huey. I like
Huey.
burning super brightly and then it's like a supernova. It just like implodes in itself.
Yeah, and you're like, did I see that? Or yeah.
I actually talked about this on another podcast once, like a few years ago, because the theme of the podcast was sort of like catharsis. And I mean, this, to me, like when I think of catharsis, I think of Baby Huey just like screaming into a mic, but like in a funky way, in a gospel way. I mean, there's times on this album where you hear the crowd and they're like right next to the band. Like they're just like clapping and yelling, like they're in the mic. And that's just like, God, I would have loved to be a fly on the wall. But in terms of the catharsis of it, I'm obsessed with Baby Huey's cover of A Change Is Gonna Come. You know, Sam Cooke, 1964. There have been a lot of really good versions of this song. Otis Redding, Solomon Burke. I think the Fugees. I think Seal did it. And then shout out to Patti LaBelle. To the listener, you should pause this podcast right now, go to YouTube and search Patti LaBelle, A Change Is Gonna Come, because there's a live version late in her life where she does this song, and it will bring you to tears. I promise you. You should pause that, do that, listen to that, and then come back to this podcast. But everybody does their own take of A Change Is Gonna Come. And to me, this is sort of like, I mean, the original, there's a really interesting story about Sam Cooke's A Change Is Gonna Come. Like, he wrote this song in response to an experience in 1963, in response to some like racism he experienced while he was on tour in Louisiana. If you've ever seen The Green Book, that movie of the jazz performer, I think there's like a direct reference to this experience that's in The Green Book, but basically like booked like a room at a hotel in Louisiana, and when they showed up with the band, they were on tour, they got kicked out of the hotel or whatever, and then they sort of protested a little bit and then got arrested for like disturbing the peace or whatever, and put in jail, even though they had like, it was Sam Cooke, he's like a famous artist and he's touring, and anyway, so Sam wanted to write a song about racism in America and how little progress we've made in the American Civil Rights Movement and stuff. And then as he was like starting to think about that stuff, Bob Dylan's Blowing in the Wind came out, and it moved him to tears. And he was like, this song is way too hip and cool for a white person to have written it, so I really need to write mine. So that's why Sam Cooke wrote A Change Is Gonna Come. But Baby Huey's version is like, it's like, look at his life. He's like in and out of rehab. He's like kind of drug addicted, but trying to sort of make this music thing work. He sees an opportunity. He sees like a future, but I don't know, just like calling out to the world for like begging for a change is so personal and so communal in his version. And it's 9.5 minutes long.
Yeah.
It's just massive.
Yeah.
Oh, it's incredible.
That one's a weird one in terms of how it relates to just time generally, I think, for so many reasons. But in that song, and I haven't heard the Sam Cooke original, but he talks at one point, he's like, I've been, I think, drinking or doing drugs or something like that for 20 years.
Personal ad-lib.
Right, yeah. But if he's like 25, 26, then that would pitch him at like 5 years old starting this stuff. So there's this kind of
poetic license.
Yeah.
Poetic license.
There's like an old soul in there, which, relatively speaking, obviously he was in the tail end of his life at that point. There is this sense of, especially the conviction of this album, it's really difficult to imagine someone who's 25 and 26 having seen and experienced enough to write something with so much depth to it. But obviously that's what's happened with this record. Yeah.
And Sam Cooke's was in B flat. Baby Huey's version is in G flat, so it's sort of transposed down. Oh wow! Which I think there. I'm not sure Baby Huey, James Ramey, has like a specific vocal range. I mean, he's sort of like kind of rapping in parts of this album. Not rapping, but like speaking in parts of this album, and then he's singing, and his vocal range is huge. I kind of have this theory about that, how like it actually was just a way to give him like runway up in terms of the scale,
Right.
like so that he could start lower and then just get to that catharsis point at some point. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, yeah, give himself like harmonic headroom or something to be able to like get up to the, yeah. I don't know.
That's lovely. That's wicked. Jeremy, is there anything else you wanted to add about this record before we go to your final one?
No, it's just that, like, looking back at the Molina thing, you know, to me, what I gleaned from that as an artist is like the studio process, or like this idea of like how complex songwriting and arranging can be, and then when you go to record, how simple it can be and still be great, and just sort of, yeah, thinking about that kind of that living process of making a record or writing, and with the Baby Huey thing, I think that, you know, it's sort of the flip side of that, which is like they never really had a chance to make a record. They sort of, without knowing it, like slammed all of this creative energy into one massive piece of output. Yeah, I don't know. There's something really explosive about that, and like, and beautiful. And I'm not totally sure how this record relates to me creatively, but it is kind of a little bit of a tragic story of like hope and opportunity unfulfilled. And it's maybe just something to keep in mind on a human level, you know, live with that energy on a day-to-day basis, because you never know.
Oh, yes, it will.
We have one more important record to talk about. If you've got the energy. This is Luke Ferrari, Press Grienne. So can I just clarify? Because there's Press Grienne number 1, which, you know, I think originally came out in 1970, and then there's the collection, Press Grienne, which has like 4 pieces on it, which came out through Editions and GRM. Which one is this?
Well, it's sort of... Okay, Luke Ferrari was composing and commissioning and performing and curating a lot in the late 60s and throughout the 70s. Like, this is like one of just like 100 pieces that he made in this time period. But this is sort of a series. But when he did Presque Rien number 1, I don't think he thought of it in terms of a series. I think he was just sort of playing around with this conceptual idea of, I mean, it translates to like almost nothing, or approaching nothing, which I think is a little bit of a better translation, because it incorporates this idea of like searching, like searching for nothing, which is just funny. But then by 76, 77, I think he was sort of meditating on this idea and trying to do another version of this, and thinking through how that idea could be extrapolated into these different auditory environments, which is where the second piece came from. But he's got this interesting quote. I mean, I don't think I have this super correct, but it was something like, he like talks about it. He's like, looking for almost nothing, I realized that it wasn't easy to find. We think we're going to find nothing somewhere, but no. And I like, it's basically like how to make a record that sounds like nothing. Okay, already that's pretty impossible. But like, what does that even mean? And like, does nothing even exist? You know, like, I just like these sort of like big questions. And the best thing about Luke Ferrari as a composer is how like seriously he takes his work or himself, but how like really kind of humorously and unseriously, I think he takes like the world around him. And I think it shows. He started the GRM with Pierre Schaeffer, and like I think I'm not such a historian when it comes to musique concrète and electroacoustics. I mean, I'm a personal fan of this stuff, but I'm not an exhaustive researcher with this stuff. But I think part of the idea was to sort of take concert music like out of the concert hall, capital C, capital H, and like out of an academic context, and really kind of play around with what music is and music technology and performance and what composing is and all this kind of stuff. And it really, like, we're living in the world that GRM created, I think. Like every like, in a messed up way, it's like everything that happens now is because people opened up these ideas and said, like, well, what if? And like, I think not. And the radio studio, and how the radio studio is a compositional tool. Mm-hmm. And so I think this piece to me is one of these kind of like Ferrari's kind of like that vacillation between taking things seriously as a creative person, as a composer, as an artist, but also like just sort of like goofing around with what a recording can be. If you actually listen, and to answer your question, I love Presque Rien number 2. I think it's my favorite one. Number 1, I think, is maybe more widely beloved. And then there's others too. There's other short ones, but there was one that he did in 89 called Avec Fille, which is sort of this like romantic extrapolation of this idea. But number 2 is like really kind of dreamscapey. Like if you've ever listened to the work of Felicia Atkinson,
yes,
I think, and Chris Cole to some degree as well. I mean, they're very influenced by the GRM. I don't know if Luc Ferrari specifically is something that they gravitate towards, but their music really is like, to me, it's taking this idea of Presque Rien like even further, like these Lynchian dreamscape environments where there's sort of sounds and collages, and they're playing with the like environmental depth, like how far we hear into an environment versus how intimate, like these tiny little intimate sounds. Where are we? Are we in a dream? And some of the sort of poetic narrations that Ferrari puts forth in this recording, like, lend to that. It's these like little observations of the environment and like small reflections and stuff, and it's kind of half whispered, but then you sort of feel like you're in like an ambient meditation, and then all of a sudden there's like a lightning, like a thunderstorm that just crashes in, or like a weird synthesizer that's just like bow, and it's like nothing is expected. And I think that's kind of the point. It's like in a way he's kind of using the concert hall to be like, all right, fuckers, you're in a concert hall, get out into the world and listen to stuff, because it's not going to be what you think it is. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, nature is out there. Like, just go listen to it,
Yeah.
But in like a hip way. It's sort of like a postmodern way. It's not like, I love Francisco Lopez, Chris Watson, Lawrence English, Jana Winderin, like, field recordists who are like shooting for this sort of hyper reality, big natural immersion sort of field recording, like listening experience. And then Ferrari's like, here's a bunch of nature sounds or whatever. Some of them are actually not even nature sounds. They're the sounds of like my tape machine, but they sound like nature because you don't know.
Yeah.
And then here's something else because I could care less. Like, I don't know. I love it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, that's great. I mean, it's interesting as well with the first one, even, which I think as a listening experience, maybe if you just had it on with no context.
The seaside.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this fishing village where it's like, he describes it as the most faithful and realistic reminiscence possible of a fishing village at dawn, which I think on first glance speaks to like the words faithful and realistic. speak to the recording as some kind of like objective depiction, but then you have that word reminiscence in there, and that's what introduces the uncertainty over
doubt.
reality, right? Where it's like, okay, but the memory of it is something very different, and he recorded that over like, you know, several mornings between 4 and 6 in the morning. So you have that thing where certain days blur together in retrospect, and you're not really sure if you're doing the same thing each day, what memory belongs to which of those days if they have similar content. So
but it's also like
lovely.
It's like it's about the fishing village and it's about the sounds of that environment, but it's also not. It's just about the meta text of like, okay, we're listening to this thing, but like it's actually more about like how are we listening? Like what, like why this? It doesn't really matter that, oh, okay, well that's the sound of water, you know, crashing against the shore, and that's the sound of like a boat creaking and this and that. It's like, what do those sounds remind you of in your life? And I don't know, whatever. Maybe I'm going too far into that, but
no, I'm totally on board.
Like what is tape? Like what is the concert hall? What is technology? Like what's technology's place in a fishing village? Like there is none. It's all a farce. And why is this music? And why am I trying to call this music? You know, I think those are the sort of questions. It's like, why do this at all?
Yes, absolutely. I found some notes on his site, and there was, for number 2, which I think relates precisely to what you're talking about. He says it's a depiction of a landscape of night that the recording engineer tries to encircle with his microphones, but the night surprises the sound hunter and penetrates his head. So it's almost like it's like, oh shit. Actually, I've been turned upon by what I thought was quite a, like where I was the kind of predator over this recording environment. I could just capture it, but suddenly all of these meta questions kind of come to claim the process. I think that's amazing.
Yeah, it just, I mean, God, it reminds me so much of David Lynch. Like, I just rewatched Lost Highway with my friends, and that film is like, it makes sense on a plot level when you watch it like linearly. Like, well, I mean, it doesn't really make sense, but your mind kind of makes it make sense. Like, oh, okay, this is happening now. This is happening. Okay, that's interesting. That doesn't really connect, but I guess it makes sense. But then you sort of get to the end of the film and you actually kind of realize that half of the film is like a dream or a hallucination, and like half of what you just watched isn't even real. Like it's all in the head of somebody who's already unreliable in the first place. Like, what does that say about our perspective on anything? Like, everything is at play here. In terms of, you know, I mean, that's a Zen Buddhist thing. It's like the world, it exists entirely in your mind. Everything is a construct. I'm not totally sure how I originally came across Luc Ferrari, but I think one of the ways that it spoke to me originally in my life was through my interest in experimental film, which does the same thing. Like it puts an image in front of your face. Like, you know, I'm talking about like Stan Brakhage or Michael Snow, Norman McLaren, Maya Deren, Len Lai, like early experimenters of film and the film art. And like this idea of like putting an image in front of your face, but then actually trying to communicate something entirely different outside of narrative or plot or character or dialogue, like painting, like trying to create painting with moving image. And I think Ferrari's work, as well as like a lot of musique concrète, but like that's what sort of spoke to me, is sort of like you're listening to an audio piece, but like it's very clear that what I'm trying to do is give you an image, and to also tell you that that image is entirely in your head and unreliable. And it, you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like a bait and switch.
Yes. Do you think that kind of energy or these kind of considerations enter into what you do?
Well, like in my work specifically, like I did God, when was this? I'm going to say 2017, but I might be wrong. But I did a record called Dizzy Congested Music, which the whole idea came from Luc Ferrari's studies for stretch sounds. which was like an exploration of the tape machine as a compositional tool, like stretching time and sound in these different ways to disorient your perception. And so that album was like directly inspired by and in reference to Luke Ferrari's piece. But as I'm kind of moving away from these just like hard concept albums, I think what I take from listening to pieces like this is kind of the humor in it. Like I try not to make sound with a capital S. Like, sit down, shut up, and listen to my music. Like, that's not... I don't really care about that. I'm more concerned with, like, am I doing justice to my personal creative process right now? Like, is this album or is this piece exploring a part of my creativity that I personally find fascinating and that I'm moving the ball forward in terms of what I'm trying to learn about myself? But at the same time, it's like, I want there to be a little bit of kitsch and tongue-in-cheek. Like I'm sort of starting my performances these days with, I mean, this is what I'm going to be doing on tour quite a bit. But like I start by just putting on a tape of this like orchestral piece, like a goofy orchestral piece that was recorded in like the late 50s, and I'm just playing along to it. I mean, it's like karaoke with the oscillators, and then that tape will just end. I'll rewind it, and then I'll start my set, which is something entirely different. And it's sort of like an icebreaker. It's like everything you're about to see, like, don't worry. This is not going to be some sort of like shut the fuck up and listen kind of thing. It's like, let's just like I'm just going to work some things out. And
Yeah.
So I think that directly comes from the ethos of Ferrari, and just, I don't know, trying to sort of create these listening environments that are immersive but like uncertain and evolving or iterative or unpredictable. That's kind of important to me.
Jeremy, so we have one more question, which is about how music comes into your life as a listener. I mean, firstly, where do you tend to buy music?
I love going to record stores. I have some of my friends are like work in or own record stores locally, and in different, in New York and Toronto and different places. So I'll just go into a record store maybe to buy one record or something, and then just hang out, listen to a few things, and kind of come away with like 4 or 5 records. And I'll do that with Spotify. Like, I'll sort of listen to a track, see who's putting it on their playlists or what it, artists that it sounds like. And a lot of times if I'm familiar with the artist, I'm likely familiar with other things, with other artists that sound like them. But then, you end up in a really cool rabbit hole. I mean, I was just in Iceland with my band, and we put on this playlist of Icelandic hip hop, and it was kind of insane to listen to, but there was like 1 or 2 artists where I was like, wait a second. This is way better than I thought it was going to be, and I'm going to have to listen to this more. I got this list of recommendations of Icelandic punk music from an old soul punk guy in Reykjavik. He just wrote down like 8 or 9 or 10 artists on a piece of paper, which I've been going through slowly one by one.
Nice.
But the other thing, and this is sort of like a recommendation to anybody who's still listening to this right now, but I love Bandcamp's tags. Like,
right.
I did this a lot during the pandemic because of the Bandcamp Fridays. Like, it just got me into this habit of going to Bandcamp and just searching by tag. And then, you'll find like a few artists that you're already familiar with, or you'll be introduced to a label that is putting out artists that are great or whatever. But then it's just like, you discover so much. And even tag, like local tags, like the Montreal tag or Toronto or something, if I'm trying to sort of get more connected with what's happening in my own community. Like, I've discovered incredible artists that, like, oh, the Montreal tag. Oh, here's this record that came out a few months ago. Let me listen to this. And then it turns out that band is playing in 2 weeks at, like, this local venue. I'll go see them.
Oh, nice.
You know what I mean?
Nice.
Like,
yeah.
I love that. And I think more people should kind of use Bandcamp for that because it's incredibly well designed for that.
Yeah. What a great recommendation. That's so good. I've done that with a couple of tags. It took me ages to figure out you could populate your own on the app and then monitor them. So that was a breakthrough for me personally. But yeah, that's a great recommendation. Where does your music listening tend to take place, Jeremy?
My wife and I have a car, and we don't drive around so much in the city, but we will go visit our parents and this and that, or we'll go on trips, and we always listen to music in the car. I mean, it's like one of our favorite things to do. But I listen to music all day, every day in my headphones while I'm working, which I have a non-musical job. I'm a freelancer. Yeah, it powers me through my day.
Nice.
It's just like, but at home, cooking dinner or at night, I'm pretty much always putting on a record at home. Yeah, there's just music everywhere, man. It is everywhere.
Yeah. Okay, one tiny little question at the end. What's something recent that you've heard that you're currently enjoying a lot?
Oh my God. My family is South African. Actually, I was born and raised in New York, but my family is South African, and so I've explored a lot of South African music in the past, 20 years. But there's a new band based out of Johannesburg that is releasing through Brownswood Recordings and We Are Busybodies. The first is based in the UK and the second is a Canadian label. And I think they release through some local South African labels as well, but they've really kind of like internationally kind of come onto the scene. It's like jazz, but it's also like traditional inspired Xhosa singing. And it's incredible. I highly recommend this, but you're going to have to put the text in the show notes because it's so hard for me to pronounce this. But
sure.
Ifufo Luka Biko is the name of the band.
Okay.
And the composer and the band's founder and composer's name is Hlanhla Nkaku.
Yeah.
Please check out this record. The record's called Azania, and it's gorgeous.
Wicked. I love that. That's lovely as well that kind of ties into your family origins as well. Cool. Jeremy, this has been super duper. Thank you so much. This has been
so fun. Thank you.
So glad. I mean, it was great.
I talked your head off.
That's what this is here for. If I still have a head at the end, then it's not gone well.
If anyone does.
It's great to talk about Masses to begin with because obviously, as I say, I've spent a lot of time with that record through mastering and then listening to it recently as well, just with a bit of distance has been delightful, and then to get your insights has been the cherry. And these 3 records, I mean, 3 really lovely picks, so thank you. It's been such a pleasure.
Thanks, Jack, and thanks again for mastering the record. It's gorgeous.
Oh, you're welcome. Okay, well, to everyone listening, we'll see you next time. Goodbye.